On today's episode of Locked On Ravens, we dive into an interview with Ravens tight end Mark Andrews, if the Ravens will win the AFC North in 2022, and more. All that coming up here next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day and tuning in. We're free and available on all platforms. That includes over on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Brightco Jewelry and Watch Insurance. Brightco brings you comprehensive, fast, and affordable jewelry insurance for as low as $5 per month. Check out your special offer for Locked On listeners and get covered in under 2 minutes at bright.co/locked on. That's bright.co/locked on. And we're back here, midweek edition of the show. A really special one here today as we're going to dive into an interview in our first segment with Ravens tight end Mark Andrews. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to Mark and interview him. He's someone who, again, just you'll see through his answers, is super humble and really just has such a competitive spirit to him. He's excited for the year. And we talk about Lamar Jackson. We talk about Isaiah Likely, the story behind his number, which is obviously 89, but it was great. I'm really excited, to put it out here today. So that'll be the first segment, really exciting. In the second segment, we'll dive into if the Ravens can win the AFC North, talk a bit about the Ravens' moves and tryouts and workouts over the past couple of days here. And then in the final segment, we'll be answering mailbag questions, talking about some more expectations for this Ravens team. We talked about that with Kadri Ismail yesterday. But if you're here new to the channel, be sure to subscribe on YouTube. If you're here with us in video form, we do put out daily Ravens content 5 days per week. So if you want video content in terms of Ravens news, analysis, updates, we have you covered here in audio form. Thank you so much for tuning in as well. Be sure to follow it anywhere you get your podcast. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, the whole 9 yards. But let's now dive in to our interview with Ravens tight end Mark Andrews. Well, joining us now on behalf of his go-to protein drink, Rocket Protein, is Ravens tight end Mark Andrews. Mark is the newest member of Team Rocket and just launched a new campaign with the brand called Beat Mandrews Challenge. And head to his social channels to check it out. Mark, I appreciate you hopping on here to talk with me for a little bit. And I wanted to start off with some football talk with you and just talk a little bit about your love for the game. Football's obviously been a part of your life for a really long time. Was there ever a moment for you, or just like one specific time you remember where you fell in love with the game and your love for football kind of started?
Oh, that's a tough one. I know for me, sports have always been a huge part of my life. I grew up on soccer, was very good at that. And I got to a point where I kind of outgrew it and started playing, football my freshman year. And it didn't take long for me to really, love the game, love everything about it. I love the physicality of it. I remember my first game, it was like 300 yards for 3 touchdowns and just went, pretty crazy. Didn't know what I was doing, really. Didn't understand the rules, but it was just having fun. It was natural. So that first game was a really cool experience.
And then obviously, you had your successful college career at Oklahoma. Moving to the draft, I mean, do you remember that moment vividly, just how it felt to you when the Ravens called you and said you're going to be a Baltimore Raven?
Just humbling, obviously super excited. There's so much that goes into that night, that day and everything, all, my family, how much they've helped me throughout my years. And just everything, thinking about, all the times that you've been down, all the times you've been up. And, I was just extremely blessed to be able to be drafted by the Ravens, an incredible organization. And, it's worked out. And so we got big plans this year. I'm very excited about this year, this team. And so, yeah, we've been working hard.
It sounds like, and you came into the league with Hayden Hurst, a fellow tight end there. And it's funny because you both were 81 in college. It's just a little tidbit. Was there a conversation between you two about who obviously Hayden got the number, you went with 89. Did you have a conversation about it, or was it just he got the number because he was first? What was that like?
Yeah, I didn't get a choice in that one. He got the number, he was the first guy. So I had to respect that. And so he carried 81 and that's what I kind of looked at, like, what do I want to be? I've always been 81. So I saw, obviously knew Steve Smith and his game a little bit, liked his fieriness. I think I kind of wear my my heart on my sleeve a little bit like that. And so I wanted to be able to carry on that tradition and be a big 89.
And someone else who came in that draft with, obviously Lamar Jackson, someone who, I mean, has been absolutely incredible throughout his first 4 years. So you're both entering year 5, which is almost kind of crazy to think about. But I mean, how has it been like just to really craft your on-field relationship with him, but also, I mean, just your friendship and your off-field relationship?
I mean, on the field is so easy. He's such a dynamic, fun, exciting player. He makes everybody around him better. And so when I'm out there, being able to, play football with him, it's incredible. He makes my life, my job, my everything easier around the field. So just having that connection, being there for him, that's my number one goal. And then off the field, he's just super cool, super fun, super good dude. He's a good friend. He was a guy in the locker room that everybody looks up to. Everybody, can go over and talk to. Always having a fun time, and there's not a bad part of Lamar. So I love the guy.
And it's really funny that you mentioned how excited you were for the 2022 season, because it feels like there are so many people who have that same sentiment about this team this year. Obviously, 2021 pretty rough with how many injuries you guys went through. But you personally, Mark, what are some of the goals you have for your year?
Oof. I never really have goals, specifically. For me, it's I want to play my best football to help this team win. And we have all the pieces. We have all the coaches. We have everything going on. And so I'm excited to see where this team can go. And it starts in a week, everything that we been working for. So I'm going to go out there. I'm going to, play my hardest, do everything I can to help this team win. And, we'll see where it goes.
In Baltimore, investing in the tight end position in the draft this year, obviously Isaiah Likely and Charlie Kohler coming in. Now, Charlie's been dealing with an injury. He hasn't been able to get it on the field, but Isaiah's just been unbelievable. I mean, had the stellar preseason, great training camp. I mean, how excited are you to work with those guys alongside, obviously, Nick Boyle there as well?
Super excited. I've been talking about Zay for a little bit now, and he's still young, obviously, but he doesn't play young. And I'm excited for kind of the world to see that, how he plays, how he approaches the game. Again, he's a super good guy. He's got the it factor to him, and he's going to be a big part of this offense. And, for me, I love that. He's going to be able to take eyes off me because he's a good player.
And I know throughout the offseason, Mark, players, they really focus on their bodies and just how they're able to recover and get back on the field for the next year. I mean, how do you approach that offseason, just getting your body ready?
I think throughout the years I've been able to learn, different things to help and different things that don't, but I have certain supplements, for me, like this partnership, I have Rockin' Protein, and, that's a cool, partnership for me because, one, it's a high sourced protein shake, and their hometown, their cow farm and everything is in Arizona. So it's high sourced milk, high sourced protein, and Rockin' Protein has been my go-to for a long time, really since the high school days. And so I love it. It helps me keep me in shape, keep me on top, and keep me, competing at a high level.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you're originally from Arizona. I mean, what does it mean to partner with a brand that is based near where you grew up?
It's huge. And I think for me, anytime I can be genuine, really all the time I can be genuine about a partnership and do something that I really love. Like Rockin' Protein that, I really do enjoy drinking. It's incredible. It is a high source of protein. And it does, help me to my everyday, especially in the off season, during season, to stay strong, to stay fit, to stay healthy. That's huge for me. Being on brand is awesome.
And I mentioned the Beat Mandrews Challenge. What is that, and how do you get involved with that?
Yeah, that was a good time. We had a little promotion, a commercial, a video that we did, and y'all go check out my socials. But it was basically, we had a bunch of these different guys come in and try to do, the Mandrews Challenge, try to do a couple different things, and it didn't go too well for them, but it was a good one for me.
Yeah, so if you want to see that, get involved in just watching, you can be sure to check out Mark's socials. But Mark, I appreciate you hopping on with me. Thanks so much for joining me.
Kevin, I appreciate you, man. Thank you very much.
Again, it was so great to interview Mark, and it was his birthday yesterday. So happy belated birthday, I guess, because we're now September 7th, his birthday, September 6th. So he was great to talk to. I really enjoyed our conversation and some tidbits in there, about the number and everything that just give you insight into just the person Mark is. And he's a really good one, and obviously a phenomenal talent on the field as well. But we're going to head into our first break here on Locked On Ravens. Coming up in our second segment, we're going to be diving into if the Ravens can win the AFC North in 2022. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about Brightco. And we've all heard those stories about the failed engagements and engagement fails. You don't want to be that guy, and you certainly don't want it to be splattered all over the internet. The guys at Brightco Jewelry Insurance will make sure you get a replacement for the full value of that ring, no matter if it's lost or stolen or you just can't figure out what happened to it. And insurance can be a pain sometimes, but the guys at Brightco turn the whole experience around. So it's probably the easiest thing you can do for yourself this week. There's no excuses. For $5 a month, you get totally comprehensive coverage, and it won't take you more than 2 minutes on your cell phone. Check it out, bright.co/locked on. We're back here with our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you again. Thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day here. Be sure to subscribe to this channel on YouTube if you haven't already. Like this video, and also be sure to follow us along in audio form as well. But we're now going to be diving into a topic of conversation I think a lot of people have wondered throughout the course of this offseason. If the Ravens can win the AFC North, it really is something that last year the Ravens finished last. They were last in their division. You don't hear that very often. The Baltimore Ravens finished last in the AFC North. Now, it was a tough year overall. You know, you're talking about just an absolute litany of injuries, so many guys and quality players going down. It's not like they lost their fifth-string running back and their fourth-string corner and their third-string middle linebacker. They lost so many players. And in a year that Cincinnati was relatively healthy, I know Cleveland went through their fair share of stuff. Pittsburgh, same thing. But look, injuries happen in the NFL. Baltimore went through so many of them, though. And I think something that sticks out to me, at least, is the fact that Baltimore did go 1-5 in the division last year. Again, something you don't really hear about. And the divisional games are always kind of close. You know, some teams more than those, like Pittsburgh, for example, those Ravens-Steelers games, always so much fire, so much intensity. You almost expect them to be, regardless of whether one team is 14-0 and the other is 0-14, you do expect some type of intensity in some form of a close game. And if you want to argue about, you know, who Lamar Jackson has struggled against the most in his career, team-wise, the winner to that answer, the answer is probably Pittsburgh, and it's not very close. See, Lamar struggled against Pittsburgh quite a bit, but I think that the balance of the AFC North obviously has shifted with Cincinnati and just what they were able to do in 2021, obviously making it all the way to the Super Bowl. You know, you don't do that just based off of a couple things breaking here or there, some luck. They are a talented football team. Now, I think Baltimore, with their guys back with the additions they made, certainly have the chance to compete with Cincinnati, but I think when you look at their 2021 games, just Baltimore's divisional games last year, the Cincinnati games were bad. Like, those were bad games. The Ravens got blown out in both those games. You have 41-17 in week 7. You go all the way to week 16. That was 41-21. So those I'm kind of throwing out the window for now. You look at the other games, though. Against Cleveland in week 12, that was a 16-10 win, so one possession win. Then you have Pittsburgh, a 20-19 loss on a 2-point conversion fail, so 1 point. Then week 14, 24-22, a 2-point loss. You go to Pittsburgh in the final week of the year, 16-13 in overtime. So these are all games, all one-possession games that Baltimore could have easily won. And the fact of the matter is they didn't have a lot of their players for those games. Now, obviously, teams like Cleveland, teams like Pittsburgh, they didn't have some of their guys too. But the fact that the Ravens were in those games until the end, the fact that they were able to, although they did lose 6 straight games, be competitive in those games, and then went and improved their roster. I think they first of all had to do that because of just how talented the AFC got. I mean, this AFC conference is unreal talent-wise, absolutely unbelievable. You have teams, and it's almost like what happened in 2020 with the Ravens, where they almost missed the playoffs as a team that had a record that you shouldn't really be missing the playoffs at. And it really came down to the final week of the year that they had to fight for that playoff spot, when usually you have, you know what, the record that year was probably good enough to make the playoffs and not even have to play for it in week 17. We're going to be seeing that, I think, too, in an uptick scale in 2022, just because of what teams in the AFC West did, just those teams. I mean, the Las Vegas Raiders adding Devontae Adams, the Los Angeles Chargers bringing in Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson. You have teams like Denver who traded for Russell Wilson. I mean, Kansas City lost Tyreek Hill, but they brought in a bunch of new talent there as well. You have teams like Buffalo, who was able to bring Von Miller over. Now, Buffalo, they're not in danger of missing the playoffs, at least in my opinion. But you have teams like Miami who brought in Tyreek Hill. Teams in the AFC South who are looking to compete as well. Indianapolis trading for Matt Ryan. So there are a bunch of teams competing. So the easiest way to make the playoffs in a talented AFC is to win your division. It's top 4 seed guaranteed. It sounds pretty nice. So you don't have to go through all those crazy tiebreaker wild card scenarios. Now, I think for Baltimore, when you're looking at the teams in the division, so just, taking Baltimore out of it for a second, what did those teams do over the course of the offseason? Well, Cincinnati, I think they did what they should have done, and that was improve their offensive line. Leo Collins, they brought in Ted Karras, and they added a lot of reinforcements there in the draft. They focused defense. They brought in Dax Hill, who I think is going to be really good for them, and they're returning a lot of their guys. I mean, Joe Burrow had a extremely good year in 2021. Jamar Chase broke out as a rookie. What's his second year going to be like? You obviously have T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd over there too. They brought in Hayden Hurst to play tight end, former Raven over there. Joe Mixon had a really good year last year also. So I think for Cincinnati, some of their weaknesses do lie on the defense. What does their secondary look like? Jesse Bates, obviously very talented. Von Bell as well. And I think the cornerback situation is just a pick on Eli Apple situation. What are you going to do there? Logan Wilson is a very good linebacker. So they are a talented team. I think when it comes down to it, it's going to be a 2-team race between Baltimore and Cincinnati, but you can never count out a team like Pittsburgh, who is coached by Mike Tomlin, and he has his team ready every single week. You look at Pittsburgh, they lost Ben Roethlisberger. They bring in Mitch Trubisky. They draft Kenny Pickett. George Pickens coming in there. They're replacing pretty much Juju Smith-Schuster with George Pickens. It feels like Chase Claypool could move inside a little bit. Najee Harris, he's the workhorse there. The offensive line looks a little bit improved. I'd still say it's a weakness of that team right now, but it's a little bit improved. Stephon Tuitt at times a pretty big hit to them. You also have that defense, though, that doesn't necessarily need one player like Stephon Tuitt to be dominant. Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, all those players. They also have a pretty good cornerback room with some underrated players. They brought in Levi Wallace in the offseason. So that defense is one that you look at. Miles Jack, another addition I really like for them. But the quarterback situation there is just, it's a little too iffy right now. I think Baltimore would blow out Mitch Trubisky. I think they would blow out Kenny Pickett. I think that just in terms of it's different. It's almost like what we're talking about this week with the Jets, with who would the Ravens have a better shot to win against? Zach Wilson, who's the relatively inexperienced player, but maybe at this point the better quarterback than a Joe Flacco, who has the experience, has seen a lot of different things, but is he going to make a decision here or there that might not be the best one? It's the same thing. Well, not exactly, but it's similar with Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett. Although Pickett is a rookie and he has not seen the NFL game yet, so it's a tiny bit different. I think Pickett, obviously, but by the end of the year, I think we're probably going to see him in. Trubisky was named the starter. That wasn't really a shock in my book, but I just think Baltimore against either player would do really, really well. So I think that Pittsburgh, to me, you can't count them out, but at the same time, I just don't see them competing in the AFC North this year. I think maybe they could finish with maybe like an 8-9, 9-8, 10-7. Type record potentially. Then you look at Cleveland. Cleveland's roster is so talented, but you look at the quarterback situation again. I think 11 games for Deshaun Watson, that's a lot of games in terms of football for a season. I think that with what Deshaun Watson's going to miss in 2022, will Cleveland put themselves in a position to maybe be in contention when Deshaun Watson gets back? Again, Deshaun Watson is missing almost 2/3 of the year. You're missing a guy who, it's pretty tough with the quarterbacks they have there with Jacoby Brissett, and what's he going to be able to do? So with Deshaun Watson missing most of a year here, again, 11 weeks out of a 17-game season, that is a lot of football time in terms of just what the Browns will be able to do with their schedule. They will play Baltimore once with Deshaun Watson, once without Deshaun Watson. I don't see it this year for them. I just think the Deshaun Watson situation is going to continuously be there for them. First of all, it's not going away. They paid him all that money. They traded picks for him. They invested, and now they're dealing with that. So that's what they have to deal with. But I think in terms of the rest of their roster, it's a talented one. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt being that 1-2 duo. They brought in Amari Cooper. The wide receiver position, a bit of a weakness for them. We'll see what David Bell is. Tight end also, where are you looking there? David Njoku expected to take a big leap, but the offensive line is pretty good. And you look at the defense. The defense is going to be really improved this year. Denzel Ward, they brought in Martin Emerson in the draft. The safeties, Grant Delpit, John Johnson there as well, who struggled a bit in 2021. But I think a lot of people expect him to bounce back in 2022. And then obviously you can't talk about the Browns without talking about Myles Garrett and just what he brings to the table at the edge position and how he's able to just dominate offensive linemen. On the defensive line, they also have a couple of other really good guys. I know the interior of their defensive line is a little bit iffy right now, but they have Jadeveon Clowney on the other side of Garrett. So that's where they're looking there. But at the same time, I just think with Deshaun Watson missing 11 games, I don't think they're going to be competitive until Watson gets back. And I think by that point it will be too late. So in my opinion, who knows even, because Deshaun Watson hasn't played football in like 2 years. So is he going to need time to work the rust off or something? Who knows? But so for me, I think this is a 2-team race between Baltimore and Cincinnati. That's where I am on it right now. I have the Ravens winning the division in a tiebreaker. I think they absolutely 100% can. This is a team that made so many additions depth-wise. They, I think, match up a lot better now, and obviously health permitting, they match up a lot better now than teams that maybe they didn't match up super well against just because they were missing so many key depth pieces. But if you get J.K. Dobbins back and Ronnie Stanley and Marcus Peters, and they're all back by midseason at somewhat full strength, I think that's huge for them. Plus the guys they added like Marcus Williams, Morgan Moses, etc. So I absolutely believe Baltimore can win this division in 2022. I'm actually penciling them in to win the division. So that's where I am with the AFC North. But before we get into our final break, I do want to talk a bit about Kyler Fackrell, who was reported that he's going to be signing over with the Ravens practice squad. Now, it is very known how little healthy outside linebackers the Ravens have right now on their roster. It is 2 right now, 2 total, in Odafe Owe and Justin Houston. And Fackrell comes in, brings some NFL experience here. He's a 6-year player, was drafted in the 3rd round of 2016 by Green Bay, had a 10.5 sack season in 2018 with the Packers, and his total 23.5 sacks in his 6-year career. I would not be shocked if both Stephen Means and Kyler Fackrell were called up from the practice squad. Now, realistically, it'll probably be more like 1, but still, they need bodies there. They absolutely do. I think that, and also a tidbit is that the veteran salaries don't get weekly after week 1. So if the Ravens signed a veteran now, that salary would not be weekly. But if they were actually to wait until after week 1 to sign a veteran to their active roster, then that salary would be a weekly salary. So that might be why Baltimore's waiting. Just a tiny tidbit there. But I have confidence in Odafe Owe. I have confidence in Justin Houston. It's not the players, it's the depth. What happens if Odafe Owe goes down? That is disaster for the Ravens. So we'll talk a bit about the pass rush in the final segment. We'll head into our final break here. Coming up, we'll be diving into mailbag questions, talking about that pass rush, the wide receiver group, and more for Baltimore. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on the show. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about Prize Picks. In fantasy, it's been in my life forever. It feels like forever. We have the Locked On Ravens fantasy leagues this year. And for Prize Picks, it's really easy to use. You can have a ton of current entries, and how it works is you pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will go score more or less in their Prize Picks projection, if they do, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch, like the NFL, the NBA, the MLB. You have NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, and more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for instant deposit match of up to $100. We're back here with our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostraker, your host, still here with you. Again, thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day here. Now, for your second listen, check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022, an 8-episode extravaganza to get ready for the NFL season. Local team experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, plus a betting angle from Lee Sterling of Locked On Bets, all combining into the Ultimate NFL Preview. Search for the Ultimate Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. But again, we talked to Mark Andrews in the first segment. We talked about the Ravens in the AFC North in the second segment, but let's now dive into some mailbag questions here in the final segment. We got a lot of good ones this week, and I know a lot of talk has been about the pass rush, just what it's going to be with how little healthy outside linebackers they have on their roster. And I do want to first talk about a question from at UDIP, IDIP, WeDip, and they ask, will pass rush and receiver be as bad as I think it'll be? Well, I don't know how bad you think it'll be, but I'm assuming based off the question, you think it'll be bad, like really bad. I don't think so. I think, first of all, for wide receiver, I have a lot of confidence in Rashad Bateman, first of all, just as a number one wideout. He's entering a role that's big, though. He has to have that breakout second season. I think it's the depth behind him that people are kind of worried about. What can Devin Duvernay do? Can James Prochet step up? How can Tylan Wallace respond? Demarcus Robinson, what role is he going to play right now? There are arguments, there are conversations about whether Demarcus Robinson is already the wide receiver 2 on this team, already the wide receiver 2. So I think for what Baltimore has, they have skill sets that I think it balances out pretty well. Like Devin Duvernay, he's not Marquise Brown. He can't replace the full extent of the speed, but he does have speed. I think Demarcus Robinson brings them a big-bodied element. He stands around 6'1", so he's not like the 6'4" towering guy, but he excels in contested catch situations. James Prochet, a crafty route runner, exceptional hands. And then Tylan Wallace, someone who I think can do a lot of different things lining up in some different places for him. So, look, is their receiver room the best in the NFL? No, it's not the best in the NFL. These guys are also probably going to be learning on the fly a lot. This is a very young wide receiver room. Demarcus Robinson, 27 years old, instantly the best wide receiver, or not the best, but the oldest wide receiver in that room at 27. So you're talking about best wide receiver, I go Rashad Bateman. You're talking oldest, it is Demarcus Robinson. That is a fact. So I think wide receiver, they'll be okay, but I definitely wouldn't have their current situation deter them from adding somebody else like a veteran, like another veteran, let's say. If the trade deadline or in free agency or something like that, in terms of pass rush, yeah, they definitely need to bring somebody in. I mean, you can wait on Tyus Bowser. Once Tyus Bowser gets back, a lot of the issues and worries, I think, kind of go away, but you just don't know when that is right now. And can you rely on calling up a Steven Means or a Kyler Fackrell every week? That's something that might not be doable. So you might need an extra offensive lineman and an extra defensive lineman. Now, I think with just the way their outside linebacker room is, they're going to have to call up somebody, but they might have to get very creative. Calais Campbell being a big edge, Malik Harrison at Sam, but there are guys out there like Jason Pierre-Paul, like Devon Kennard, who I think they should definitely look at. So I don't think they're going to be as bad. Like, again, I have super high hopes for Odafe Owe. I'm very confident in Justin Houston as well. It's just a matter of, can they fill out their roster a little bit? They have 6 inside linebackers right now, so maybe it comes from there. I don't know what they're going to do, but I think it's very likely we're going to see some call-ups to that position early on. Our next question here comes from Afida Philly, who says, hello, Kevin. Joe will be the quarterback for the Jets. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing to face such an important face of the Ravens' history? Thanks for the show and have a nice day. Well, you have a nice day as always. And we're going to get confirmation on that, I believe, sometime soon, whether that is today or tomorrow, whether it will be Zach Wilson or Joe Flacco. Actually, I mean, at the time of this recording, it's looking actually more like it'll be Zach Wilson than Joe Flacco. But I think the Flacco storyline, if it does end up happening, is just so intriguing for so many different reasons. I think there's always an extra element when you talk about players playing their former teams. We saw it with Earl Thomas against Seattle in 2019, where the guys really wanted to go out there and get a win for Earl Thomas. They had talked about that, and Earl Thomas was very grateful for it when it happened. They go out there. It was Marcus Peters' first game. They go to Seattle, beat Russell Wilson and that Seattle team in Seattle. So for Joe Flacco, and he even talked about it, he said, hey, you know what? It's not the biggest deal, but I'm definitely not, saying I haven't thought about it before. That's what he was saying. So he's definitely given some thought to it. He said he remembered Steve Smith's game when he was in Baltimore against Carolina, where he went off in that game. And look, there's added motivation to it. So I don't think there's going to be like any bad blood between these two parties. I mean, I think it's just like Joe Flacco is motivated because he is playing a team, if he is the starter, that he has such a deep history with, such deep ties to overall. And you want to say, hey, you know what? I'm still playing in this league and I'm not on your team anymore and I'm doing it against you now. How do you like that? It's kind of that competitive edge, competitive spirit. So I think the importance of it for Joe Flacco, it is important for him. He can downplay it, and I think that, that's what he's doing right now. But I think for him, it is very, very important. And I don't think it's a good or a bad thing necessarily. Like, look, the Ravens going to go out there. I think, honestly, Baltimore has a better chance of beating Zach Wilson than Joe Flacco, just at this point, based off of Wilson returning from an injury. And I think Joe Flacco being a veteran in that room. We've seen the Ravens historically feast on first, second-year quarterbacks. So I personally would prefer the Ravens to play Zach Wilson than Joe Flacco. I'm not saying that Wilson's the worst quarterback right now, and will be the worst quarterback throughout his career. But I think that what you have is a team that just is able to confuse young quarterbacks. So I would rather have the Ravens play Zach Wilson. Personally, I know some people would rather have it be Joe Flacco because we've seen some of the, I guess, boneheaded mistakes that he can make sometimes. That's what people call them, those quote-unquote boneheaded mistakes. But I think for the Ravens, if they play Joe Flacco, definitely not the end of the world, but some intriguing storylines there overall. Our next question here from Gunny Ravens. He says, hey, KO, do you think Giro will try to test Sauce Gardner early? I think it is possible. I mean, the matchup, or one of them at least I'm looking forward to, is Rashad Bateman versus Sauce Gardner. Whenever those two are lined up against each other, I'd assume it'll be pretty often. But look, the best wide receiver on the Ravens right now is Rashad Bateman. The best corner on the Jets right now is Sauce Gardner. Those two are going to be matched up a lot. And I think that with the Ravens maybe not having J.K. Dobbins for this one, they might not. We'll see what ends up happening. I think the Ravens could definitely test Sauce Gardner early. Now, Sauce Gardner is a great player. He is going to be a phenomenal NFL player. So if Rashad, it wouldn't shock me though if Rashad Bateman gets a couple of steps on Sauce Gardner one of these plays. He's a phenomenal route runner, but we all know what Sauce Gardner did in college. Now, college versus the NFL, it's a little different. But I think early on, maybe to establish a tone and to establish their run game a little bit, they can utilize maybe play action. They can get the pass game involved early so the Jets can't stack the box necessarily against the run game. So we'll see what ends up happening. But I wouldn't be shocked if Greg Roman tests Sauce Gardner a little bit. Finally, we have a question here from Alex Schultz, who says, is J.K. Dobbins playing week 1? And yeah, it's a pretty big toss up for me. So my gut feelings, again, I am not a doctor. You might have heard that one before, but my gut feelings are that Marcus Peters and J.K. Dobbins will play and Ronnie Stanley won't. Now, all three of those could go the opposite way. I could be completely wrong on all of them, but I feel like if J.K. Dobbins were to play, it would not be anywhere close to a full workload. I think Baltimore is seriously going to try to bring him back very slowly. And same thing with Marcus Peters, same thing with all those guys. They want to get them in the game, right? They want to get them game action because they can help the team, right? They are talented. They can help the team win, but they don't want to just throw them out there and say, hey, you're playing 95% of snaps. Here you go. Like that. This is what you're getting. Go out there and good luck. No, they're taking the cautious approach. So maybe J.K. Dobbins gets 35% of snaps, 40% of snaps, and then you kind of split the other three up in terms of what could happen with Kenyon Drake and Mike Davis and Justice Hill. But if Marcus Peters plays, I think we could see a little bit more. It just feels like, from what we've seen and what we've heard, Marcus Peters is the farthest along out of any of them, even though he came off the PUP list a little later. I don't know that, obviously, for sure, but it just feels that way. So I'm excited to see if those guys, obviously, if they suit up, I'll be super excited. I know a lot of other people will too. But at the end of the day, you don't want to rush him back because we saw it in week 1 with Ronnie Stanley last year. His play on the field when he was out there not at 100% was not good. That didn't help the team. Didn't help Ronnie Stanley. It was a lose-lose for all parties involved. So I wouldn't want to have that situation with guys like J.K. Dobbins, Marcus Peters, or Stanley again if they're not fully 100% overall. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me get back here tomorrow. It'll be our first crossover Thursday of the 2022 season, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.